All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine Women and Words. I am Michelle, and this, of course, is Diana.
Hello.
And this evening, we have Audrey Burgess with us. We're going to be talking about her novel, The Miniscule Mansion of Myra Malone. And as a huge fan of alliterations, love the title.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for making
Team
time and coming to hang out with us. I just had to do, I was working on a project and the whole title was all D's and eventually like it got cut down by like 5 words. Like that's okay.
Oh,
But it was still all D's, but it
yeah,
wasn't
that's
like
good.
five D's.
That's pretty sufficient. That's good. 5 Ds.
Like, how can we make this work? So, but anyway, but thank you so much for coming to hang out with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Lilo has taken a break from judging already.
Yeah, she is. She's trying to curl up right now on my lap and go to sleep for at least a little while until
And I
something
think
comes by the window.
until she decides to judge us again.
Yeah.
We are, as everyone knows, we are a judgment-free circle. However, Lilo, Diana's pup, I think we've posted pictures of her on our Instagram or maybe in our
Yeah.
story. She has the ultimate judgy face.
Mhm.
So every now and then when she pops up, she's judging all of us. So
That's why we don't do the
anyway,
judgments. We allow her
yeah,
to do
no,
Yeah,
that's her wheelhouse. We let her do it.
I figure she's just judging us off camera right now. So I
Yeah. Oh,
anticipate
for
she's just
sure.
keeping a list.
it.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
So for our not our readers, our listeners who may not be familiar yet with the book, can you give us an overview of what the story is about?
Sure. So the book is actually named after a blog in the book called The Miniscule Mansion of Myra Malone, and it's maintained by kind of a reclusive 34-year-old amateur miniaturist who lives in a cabin in Arizona and has spent most of her life housebound ever since she was in a childhood accident. And her best friend, when she's in her 30s, finally kind of cajoles her into putting this minuscule mansion, she calls it the mansion with a capital M, that she inherited as a child and that she's kind of dedicated her whole life to curating, almost like a museum. Her best friend convinces her to put that online. And not long after they start posting pictures and stories that Myra writes about the mansion up on the website, it starts getting a lot of traffic and actually becoming a little bit of a viral sensation. And not long after that, they wind up hearing from a gentleman who lives across the country in Virginia, who's very confused because the site is depicting his house, a miniature version of his house, and one of the posts is a picture of his bedroom with his bedroom furniture and his bed linens and his lamp, and so they're trying to kind of figure out how that could possibly be true, and the book is unwinding how that happened.
I love the magical realism that is a part of this book. And we're not going to give any spoilers away. This is 30 minutes, no spoilers. But I absolutely love that. Now, I'm curious about your inspiration. Do you do miniatures yourself or?
So I always loved miniatures. I didn't have any growing up because I had 4 brothers and a dog instead. And so I was an admirer from afar. I had a rainbow bright, kind of fluffy zip up house, and I think I often repurposed my brother's Skeletor castle from the He-Man set, but I didn't have a dollhouse. But I always, whenever I would find one in a museum, or there's a botanical garden here that used to do an exhibit of them every Christmas, and I've just always, I have to be dragged away from looking at them. I just find them absolutely fascinating. And in the early days of the pandemic, when I was spending a lot of time online, I'm sure that doesn't relate to anybody else. No one else was doing that. I would just be, scrolling endlessly, trying to, doom scroll. But I started noticing that a lot of writers that I knew among all of the other weird hobbies that we all started picking up, they were starting to do miniature kits. And there were these, the ones that caught my eye most frequently were these, and you can buy them online. They're called book nooks. They're designed to slot between two books on a shelf. And some of them have lights and windows and spiral staircases and little teeny tiny volumes. And I just found them absolutely fascinating. So at the time I had been querying a different book that was much darker. It was kind of a darker, twisty mystery. And that was kind of inconsistent with the audience I'd been building as a writer, because after I wrote that book, I started writing a lot of humor and publishing a lot of pieces with McSweeney's and things like that. So it wasn't really consistent with the voice I had built. So I decided originally I was going to write a kind of a lighthearted romantic comedy about this, miniaturist. Maybe she makes the kits, or maybe, but somehow it gets really popular and she finds love, and that's what I'm going to write. So that's kind of what I started out with. It was the first time as a writer that the title actually occurred to me first. Usually I really struggle with titles, but as soon as I started thinking about something small, something little, something minuscule, it just came out. And so I started writing, and about 1,200 words in, there was a moment where Myra, as a child, has kind of gotten the little mansion into her attic, and she's rearranging furniture inside, and she catches a reflection of her own eye in a mirror, and it winks back at her, and she doesn't know how to wink. And when that happened, and that scene just kind of popped into my head, fully formed, when that happened, I was like, oh no, this is not a romantic comedy. This is a different story. And I kind of knew right then where it was going and where it was going to end up. And from that moment on, it was just trying to keep up.
I love it. I recently got into miniatures. Like, I had a dollhouse growing up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then I really got taken by those book nooks that you could put into. They're so cool.
They're so cool. Right.
Yeah. And I finally got one for Christmas this year, and I finished it just recently.
How long did it take you to put together? Just out of curiosity.
It took me about a month, but it wasn't like continuous. It was start and stop a lot of that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even, and I don't even think it was a full month, because I started right after Epiphany. So it was like around January 8th was when I started it. And then I finished it last weekend.
One of the things I really like about watching people build them is when they're posting progress notes, so that you can kind of see how everything is coming together as it's being put together.
Yeah.
I didn't have miniatures before I wrote this book, and I didn't follow a lot of miniaturists online. I wasn't really active on Instagram before. But now I am, and it's all miniatures all the time, and it's wonderful. And I have a lot of them now. I have everything from, there's a miniaturist here in town that we struck up a conversation at an art fair, and I got some of her pieces. And I also have gotten a piece or two from this miniaturist in London who my UK publisher, Pan Macmillan, actually commissioned to make pieces of furniture from the book for that cover.
That's so cool.
It was one of the coolest things ever. It was so awesome.
That's so cool.
See it online. It'll be out. It's out in all of the Commonwealth territories right now in paperback with that cover, and then it'll come out with that cover in the UK in June. But if you see it online, you'll recognize the pieces of furniture and the plants. And I have one of the plants now. So I've gotten, really. And actually, the coolest thing about it was when they were sending me the mock-ups as they were making them, which was so cool. One of the pieces they made was Alex's bed, and they didn't know that Alex's bed was actually my bed when I was a kid. It was my great-grandmother's, that headboard that I described.
Aww.
And I hadn't seen it since we lost it when I was in high school, I think, in a move. I can't remember if it got damaged or something. And so when I saw it, I like burst into tears. I'm like, oh my God, my grandfather is still alive. And so we were able to send him like a picture and be like, do you remember this? This is your mom's bed.
Oh,
so
wow.
That was really cool.
That's so special.
It was really neat.
And any scenes the scene that you described about the mirror, those mirror scenes just really like they freak me out, but like in a good way, because like it's just ugh.
Yeah,
but
I like that. I often find those. I know exactly what you mean. It kind of hits that like that little vein of spookiness, and you're not quite sure what might happen with it. Is it going to turn into a portal? Is it, what's it going to be? But yeah, it was kind of funny the way that it happened, and I really, I was talking recently with someone who asked me if I had set out to make it magical, right? If that was something. I read a lot of magical realism, and I grew up as a huge fantasy reader, and all that kind of thing. So I read a lot of things with magic, and I love books that weave magic into the real world, and I love books that give you just enough detail to kind of form your own picture in your head. You don't realize until you read it later that they gave you just enough detail to kind of have this image in your head of what this world looks like. But I think that even if I hadn't set out deliberately to make it magical, if that moment in the mirror hadn't happened, I still think there's something kind of inherently magical about miniatures, because they're just amazing little works of art, and the scale that some of the folks that I follow work in, it doesn't seem possible to come up with something so perfectly real on such a scale. And so I think that it kind of was always meant to be magical, because there's no way to kind of center a story on them without it turning into that.
For the mansion itself, there's one quote that I absolutely adored. And it's, the mansion needs to be ready for anyone who wants to look at it, to see themselves in the rooms. I love the personification of the mansion that it had. We've got these other characters that we can go ahead and discuss.
Yeah.
But the mansion itself had its own mindset, its own, as the technical literary term, because we're going to get a little bit into the masterclass here, is personification, where you turn an inanimate object into something that has a personality. What did you do to create that personification in the mansion?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I think it was a combination of factors. I actually grew up, I grew up with my parents were English teachers, but my dad was also a builder and had always been kind of an amateur builder. So he was always, buying these, broken down places that he wanted to remake from the inside. And he'd completely remodel and get things while we were living. And when the house started looking like, oh, it's really looking nice, that's when we knew it was time to move. And so I was kind of always surrounded by incomplete buildings, right? And I don't really know how to they have a personality. They have, when you've seen a place kind of pulled down to its studs, and where the wires are, and that your dad accidentally reversed the hot and cold taps because he wouldn't stop bothering him for snacks when he was trying to do the plumbing, or there's stories that the walls tell you. And I've always been one of those weird people that like old buildings and old gardens and I do kind of feel like they have a voice, like they have a presence. And so the idea of this place that Myra had really dedicated her life to and had really spent most of her time with, that couldn't be a one-sided conversation. I think there had to be more than just this, big wacky thing she keeps in her attic, because that was already a little bit, and she acknowledges that that's a little bit creepy. She knows that about herself. She gets accused of that often. But I just kind of felt like, I think she says early on that, that the mansion knows its own mind about things. And I think houses are kind of like that. I think there are just times that, especially when you have an idea you're going to we don't really need this wall. We could open up this. Oh, it's a load bearing wall. Okay, well, what do we, those kinds of things. So I feel like they definitely, because we make them, right? Humans make them. So we have all of those little weird quirks and peccadillos and things that we kind of, just like anything that we make, pottery or food or anything else. I think there's part of us that goes into that. And I think that probably, you're the first person to ask that question. And now that I think about it, actually having those childhood experiences probably had a lot to do with that.
We have a certain degree of pride whenever we hear that we were the first person to ask a question.
Well,
Oh, yes.
congratulations.
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
And I loved, and you mentioned, how you grew up and with your parents, but I loved your About Me section on your website, how growing up with two linguist parents was like being raised by wolves, but with better grammar.
Yeah, we actually I grew up surrounded by books and big word nerds. And when they were in graduate school, I was in junior high, and we would have the wall of our dining room covered in butcher paper where they were like diagramming sentences, big, huge sentences that would
Oh, how cool.
diagramming. And so, yeah, that was just a big part of, structuring language and using language was a big part of what I did growing up.
Oh, your copy must have been so clean.
It is actually the combination of, they were very encouraging of my writing from a very young age, which is not the same as like I would bring it to them and be like, this is great. This is the best. And they'd be like, oh, this is great. This is a good start. We can work with this. Like, go ahead and cut this and do this, and let's edit this. And also, when was the last time you read Strunk and White? And let's kind of go to the, and that combined with the fact that when I became an adult, I became a lawyer. So just inseparable on multiple levels. And so when you're having to file briefs on a short deadline, and it's got to go to a judge and convince them to do something, you do have to write quickly and accurately and persuasively. And I wouldn't have thought that would have given me the skill set to be a novelist, but that just slotted right into what I'd spent my whole life doing anyway. And it just it did add up to writing fast and writing very clean.
There's so many people in the literary world who come from a legal background, myself included, where you have this. I feel like we are keeping a running tally of the authors that we've interviewed.
Yeah.
It's more than 5 in the last 7 years of this podcast that are actual lawyers outside of the writing world. Yeah,
there's a lot of us, I think, a lot of times people will say, oh, this. So do you write about, work? Like, is it a legal drama? I'm like, no, it's nothing to do with anything I do at all in any way.
What is the furthest you can get?
Furthest as I can get.
When I was working as a paralegal, I didn't even watch legal shows.
I know, you can't. It's like a doctor watching ER, right? You're just like, I object, rule against perpetuities, and you're like, what is that? No.
This is not how any of this works. I'm actually going back now and watching Suits because everybody raved about it.
Yeah.
And I refuse to watch anything legal. I could barely watch cop dramas because of that.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, okay, I can tolerate Suits. It's good. It's okay.
Yeah. If it's the only other exception I've ever found is if it's an absurdist kind of comedy that's based like their Boston Legal was like that. There was so clearly nothing to do with reality that it was just really entertaining and I could turn my brain off. But my parents are really into legal procedurals, so they'll call me sometimes. They'll be like, "Oh, you really have to watch The Good Wife," and I'm like, "I don't have to." I'm so glad you enjoy it. I'm sure it's fantastic. I just can't do that to myself.
Yeah, my parents were like that too, where they're like, "Oh, we love these legal dramas." I'm like, "Oh, that's great," and you enjoy that. And my dad,
I'm gonna be over here.
Yeah, my dad was in computers, and I was like, what about computer shows? You watch computer shows? Oh, wait, no, they don't really have any based on what you do. So
Yeah.
You don't understand.
No, you don't get it. Okay, what it's
Unless
like.
you're a lawyer or a doctor, you really don't get it.
Right. Right.
Meanwhile, movies about authors were like, as long as there's like messy buns and sweatpants,
Right.
that
Messy
is
buns,
accurate.
Sweatpants, and then the series inexplicably ends with a $500,000 advance for someone who's never written anything before.
Oh,
Something like that.
obviously.
Was that Jane the Virgin? This is Jane the Virgin
That was Jane the
reference, isn't
Virgin, or was it $1 million? I can't remember, but like something, or someone's making enough writing to move to, I don't know, an island in Greece that they buy or something like that.
Yeah, a lot of those. I mean, those are the absurd ones.
Right,
Like,
right,
okay, have fun with that.
right.
Though I love Jane the Virgin. I will.
I do too. I do too. I loved it. Yeah, same thing where you can kind of be like, yeah, this is literally nothing that would ever happen in the best possible way. So I'm good with it.
Yeah, and it's I don't even think they do, because she got that major advance because of an auction. And I don't even think they really do those auctions so much anymore.
I don't know. Yeah, I just remember I think I might have not even, I don't think I even watched it right at the end when it was a couple of years later that I actually caught it, and I was like, I remember just being perplexed, but I mean it was also just totally consistent with that telenovela kind of feel. So it was, I didn't hold it against her.
yeah, I didn't hold it against it, because it's like, okay, you can get those absurd, because that has happened. It's that rare albino dolphin kind of situation.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, where they had these auctions, and it would happen sometimes with debut authors, where you would get these auctions for like massive amounts of dollars.
Yeah.
And they produce the book, and the book flops.
Yeah.
Or you have the situation where it's like, okay, you've got this really, really high expectation for your next book.
Right.
And so that wasn't so bad for me. But it was funny where they had their literary hub was in Miami.
Yeah.
Which was funny. That, I mean, I understand for the show they had to do that.
Right.
But everybody knows it's still New York City. As much as what LA tries to chagrin it, it's New York City.
But on the other hand, as long as you're writing a telenovela, why not pick like someplace tropical? That can be our hub. Like let's Tahiti. I mean,
it's surprising how much Jane the Virgin got right. It is surprising how much they got right. Where it's like, oh, even though you're a telenovela and you've got all of this random stuff happening that really could not happen in real life, but you get a lot of the other stuff, the publishing stuff, right? So you know what? Kudos to you for that.
Yeah. There was another, I think, going around on Twitter recently that I haven't seen it in years, but apparently the movie Proposal is much the proposal is the same way. There's a lot that it nails about it. I need to go rewatch it.
Yeah, that one was that's a fun one to watch after you become a writer and you're like, ooh, yeah, no.
So I know we are just about at our time, but we have a survey that we are asking all of our authors. We have Diana and I, an ongoing debate of plotting versus pantsing. I am a fantasy writer, so I'm 100% pantser. All day. I have no idea what I'm going to write until I sit down and my characters tell me what we're doing today. But on the flip side, in like the real world, I'm very like, I have a planner, I write everything down, I check everything off, and like I'm just very organized in the real world. And Diana, on the other hand, she's a historical fiction writer, so she's a plotter. She's very rigid and very strict in her writing, but in the real world, she is a queen of chaos.
Okay. I love how you put Queen of Chaos. I like that title. I shall be Queen of Chaos from now on. I shall make my husband refer to me as Your Majesty of Chaos.
Yes.
All shall bow down to the Queen of Chaos.
Yeah.
Yes.
I should have a t-shirt.
We should have that Queen of Chaos.
A sash, maybe.
Yeah.
No, I want the t-shirt. T-shirt. Yeah, I think that works. But I mean,
So
I'm even the
we-
kind of person where I can't even do day planners. Like I have a to-do list, and that is the most I can do because I literally have anxiety over day planners. This is the first year I have not purchased a day planner because I'm accepting the fact that this is not the year that I'm going to get over my anxiety over day planners.
So we like to ask.
Yeah, isn't it? I'm so proud of myself. I'm making healthy choices in 2023 as I drink wine for dinner.
Yes.
You can't change everything at once. You have to start
No,
somewhere.
That's right.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Embrace the small victories.
Absolutely. And get the t-shirt.
So we like to ask our authors, A, pantser or plotter,
Mhm.
and B, queen of chaos, or I don't know, duchess
Orderly.
of organization.
Yeah.
Do you have an orderly home?
Okay, so writing, I am a plantser. I go in usually lately for the last 4 things I've written. I write the synopsis first with permission to kind of deviate from it. And that kind of gives me the bone. I'm big into kind of, once I know the spine of the story, I can start throwing body parts onto it pretty quickly. So, but I have to have that frame first. And I'm like that when I write books. I'm like that when I write humor. I'm like that, I have to, once I kind of know what the frame is, I can go pretty quickly. And so I usually know the bones of the story by the time I start. And sometimes I write it all the way through. That's pretty rare. That's probably only happened one time, truly, maybe, I guess twice. The Mansion was kind of like that. And then also, I'm sometimes putting placeholders, like, so I'll have the brackets at the top of a chapter saying, here's what's happening in this chapter. No, but I don't know how to exactly word it yet. So I'm going on to the next one that I've got the scene in my head, and I'll come back to that later. So I'm more planned than I used to be. The first book that I wrote, it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe a year after I wrote it, I think I was already querying it, and I found out that I had a 22-month-long pregnancy in it. So that was an important lesson. One, don't put a pregnancy in there. 2, everybody only lives to the age of 100 exactly. Like then that I can do the math. That taught me that I needed to have a little bit more sense of timing. So a lot of times I'm plotting things against a calendar or that kind of stuff. But in terms of meticulously planning out how the story is going to look and what it's going to say, I'm not quite there. So I'm kind of in between. As to personally, I am chaos. I actually just cleaned the dining room behind me today so that I would not shock people. But I'm the type of person, I'm constantly fighting against the part of myself that's like, you can't throw away this box. You might need this box. You should put this box in a closet with the 27 other boxes that you've gotten in the past 2 weeks in case you need to mail 27 things. And so I try to keep that part of me tamped down. I am not nearly as successful as I would like because I also have 2 children who are very much like that. And they never met a rubber band that did not have deep spiritual significance to them. And so just kind of those combinations. And then my husband is very, very organized. And so he just kind of lives in a perpetual state of anxiety, which significant thing that somebody brought home from kindergarten is the thing that can sneak into the trash with a pristine paper towel on top so they won't know I threw it away. Yeah.
I do that.
Yeah.
Mom, we can keep this. Oh,
right. Yeah.
Awesome.
So great.
It sits in a stack for like a few days, and then it's very
just
slyly,
Right. Yeah.
What?
No. Yeah, I'm trying. I'm better than I used to be. Strangely, I'm better than I used to be before I had kids. Once I had kids, I think I went into a kind of another world where everything had to be in cubbies at all time, or I was going to lose my mind. And so, whatever I think it was the Marie Kondo method where she's like, cubbies are actually just something to hide clutter. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what they do. That's
Nailed
why
it.
they're miracles. They're wonderful. You will pry my cubbies from my cold dead hands.
They do bring me joy. They are staying.
Exactly. They spark joy. So every couple of years, I have to go through the cubbies and find the basically trash that has accumulated in there that no one can bear to throw away.
I feel like that is perfectly okay.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I feel like also when it comes to pantsing, it's the structure of your story, where you know the bones of your story, like the bones of your house, the bones. I feel like a pantser is somebody who just doesn't know the bones of the story at all whatsoever. Yeah. No offense to pantsers out there, Michelle.
No, I know. I knew the ending.
Right.
I knew how it was going to end. I vaguely, because it did actually change, but I just had no idea. I'm like, all right, guys, how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
That's the end goal.
Right. That is actually, I think that's why I actually didn't start writing the synopsis first as much in order to plan as I did, because I hated writing synopses so much that I was like, I'll get this out of the way. Like I'll have something there, and then I at least have something that kind of summarizes the story, and then I'll have to go back and change it later, but it's something.
Right.
And that also kind of helped me if I'd go back and consult it from time to time, because sometimes if I'd hit a snag, I'd get like 40,000 words in and I'd be like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'd go back and look at the synopsis and be like, oh yeah, you said you were going to do this. Yeah, you still got to do that. So, so it's kind of in between. But it also really just kind of varies from book to book for me.
And I've also taken to writing the synopsis first because of that one major thing. So I hated writing synopses as well. And
they're the worst.
They are. And if you're going to be in this business and you're going to write more than one book, you better get used to writing synopsises, and you better learn to love them in some way, shape, or form. And so, I've started doing it first thing, and it's such a useful tool.
It really is. Yeah. Oh. It's one of those useful tools that you hate how useful it is because you don't want everyone to be right.
It makes my little water heart happy.
Yeah, it's like it's like when everybody tells you you've got to drink more water, and then you drink more water and you feel better, and you're like, damn it.
I guess.
Right, fine. I feel hydrated now. Okay.
Well, everyone, if you would like to order your own copy of The Miniscule Mansion of Myra Malone, words are my friend. You can order your own copy by visiting our show notes. You can click on the link to our bookshop on bookshop.org and order your own copy. As always, bookshop.org supports our wonderful writers. It supports the podcast, but most importantly, it supports all the wonderful indie bookstores out there. And Audrey, thank you so much for hanging out with us and chatting. We've had so much fun.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much for chatting with me. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, you too. All right, bye.
All right. So we are switching gears now and starting our book of the month discussion. Of course, for February, we are reading The Many Daughters of Afung Moy by Jamie Ford. Very, very excited to have him on the show at the end of the month.
Oh, I can't wait to pick his brain.
Yes, I think this was when Diana was the one to see the email reply, and I got the text in all caps going, "We got Jamie Ford!"
I was like, I'm going to reach out to him because I absolutely adore him and his books, and I want to be able to sit down and pick his brain, especially with a book like this, where y'all know that I love the generational and the family sagas, and I wanted to be able to read this book, and I'm so glad I have, and I just cannot wait to talk to him about this.
I mean, this is basically why we started this podcast. So we would have an excuse to ask authors questions about the books that we love.
Mm-hmm.
So
True story.
that's really why we did that. So yeah, so we are, Diana, of course, true to form, is ahead of me, but we're going to be talking up to chapter 9, which we have a full cast of characters in this book. So this is like, I'm listening to the audiobook. So I am, and I have the hardcover, but I just got the hardcover today. So I am going off of an audio memory, and I haven't actually seen the names written down. So what is her name? I can't remember.
Liking,
that's right. So we're in the 1890s, and Liking is the descendant that we're reading about now, and we are at the Black Death outbreak.
Yes, it just started. Yeah, the Black Death just started the outbreak in San Francisco.
Yes. So there is a lot to unpack, and this book, I love like the hint of well, not magic, because it's obviously just through the generations, but it feels magical. And I love it.
And it's, looking at, because we talk about, like, in the very intro of the book, he talks about certain things are remembered, like the genetic memory that people have. And it's really interesting, especially when you consider the whole nature versus nurture debates that go on in all the psychology circles, if your behavior is more genetically induced or if it's more nature induced. And it's, interesting, where I'm sure you could see that, Michelle, with your kids, whether there's something from a genetic memory from like your grandparents or great grandparents that gets passed down to them, or if that's something where it's a learned behavior that gets perpetuated from one generation to the next, where you subconsciously end up putting that on your own children. It's the question of, are children truly blank slates when they are born?
Oh, it's the craziest thing. Landon has my dad's hair, like his, not the shade, but the texture, and like his hair parts the same way. Like he has my dad's hairline, and it's the weirdest, and my dad's head, like the same shape head. It's bizarre. So yes, but I know that's more like not biological, not biological. No.
Yeah, that's biological.
But
that's yeah.
But yeah, that's the scene where the chapter with Dorothy, where she's talking about that and how parents, see the traits being passed down to their kids, and oh, they got that from me, or they got that from their father. That really kind of was like, yeah, I do that all the time. Like, oh, that's definitely me. That's definitely Rich. I don't know where they got that stubborn streak from. That's not me.
It's really interesting that's reading this as somebody who is starting like the adoption process and is working on like pre-approval for an adoption, and through the foster system, no less. And so it's really interesting seeing this from that side of things, where you have the genetic memory, because you already know that you're going to get the kid they already have this background. They're not going to be clean slates, so to speak. When they come to you, there's already going to be trauma and issues from their past. But to also see it through the light of this book, where you have this genetic memory going from generation to generation, is something that created a whole lot of thoughts in my head as I go through this process. And I feel in a lot of ways, as somebody who plans on being an adoptive parent, it's a good book to read. I think it's one of those books where it makes you sit down and think about, okay, this is not just going to be some new shiny baby that's going to come into my world. It's going to have a baby that's got past issues from this family trauma that that's gone on for generations.
I've had a whole point, and as soon as you stopped talking, my point went out with it. So, but it was fascinating. It was going to be a good one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I love one of the other things that I think is really cool. And I don't know if I have met all of the descendants yet. I've met Zoe, Greta, Lai King, Afang Moy, the very first one. And
so you said Zoe, right?
Zoe, yes. And Dorothy. Did I say Dorothy?
Yes. I think there's one that you haven't. Oh no, you've met Faye.
And Faye, that's right.
Yeah, you've met them all.
So I love that none of the time periods are now. Like Dorothy is in 2045. So she's, 20 years down from us. And then it's Greta, who is in 2014. So he's like writing this, and then of course, it stretches all the way back to 1822, I think. So I just love that there's no timeline in this book that's the present day. Like you're looking at it from either from the past or from the future. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and that is very cool. And I also want to, take a moment to talk about Afang Moy and the fact that she was a real live woman. This, and this is one of the beautiful things about historical fiction, where we can take a little bit of history and create this story based on actual history. But she was a woman. She was put in this terrible situation, sold into what's slavery, really, what it came down to for her when you look at the history and you look at it. And it was horrendous. And so to have that, where did this generational trauma lead to with her descendants years on? And nobody really knows what happened to her, if I'm not mistaken. So to see that is so fascinating.
Yes, this is definitely I want to take notes now, that because I was listening to the audiobook before the hard copy arrived. Hard copy has arrived. Now I want to take notes and research rabbit holes.
Research rabbit holes everywhere. Oh my God. You're going to have so many research rabbit holes.
So yeah, there's definitely a lot. And yeah, I don't know it, Jamie, if you're listening, we mean well, but we will have very many questions.
Oh, so many questions. It's going to be wonderful. Yeah,
for us.
Yeah. You might get done with the hour and be like, oh my God, those questions. But yeah, it's so fascinating, and I'm so interested in picking his brain on this. And it's also interesting for me coming from the, these different perspectives, because you have the generational trauma and learned behaviors, and then you have the generational genetic memory. And then in a lot of the Italian American circles, when you talk about generational trauma, it's they refer to it as generational curses, which is also a fascinating thing as well. So this book just hits all sorts of buttons for me in a wonderful, wonderful way. And I'm listening to the audio myself. I absolutely love the audio. It was Greer McAllister who had recommended the audio. And I was like, oh, it's really great. And I want to see if I can get him on the show. So it's Greer's fault that we're going to have Jamie on the show.
Well, yeah, this was and the audiobook, the audiobook is amazing. The narrators is it multiple narrators or is it?
Yes.
It is, yeah. They all do an incredible job with giving these characters voices and even more personality just by you know giving them voices. I swear I'm eloquent and sophisticated, but my words just are not coming tonight.
Yes, it's okay.
But yeah, I'm about, according to Libby, I'm 26% done. So I think it's February 2nd, a quarter of a way through. That's pretty solid. And I'm only at 1.5 speed. I haven't even kicked it all the way up to double speed. Do you kick up your speed on the audiobooks?
No, I do not. I'm
Like
old
not
school.
once?
No, I don't. I like my regular talking speed. I talk fast enough. I don't need somebody else talking fast to me.
No, I like routinely start them at like 1.5 and then slowly I work up to 2, because then I can read it twice as fast. But maybe that's just me.
Maybe that's one
Where's
of your
Lilo? I feel like
generational
someone
things.
needs to judge me.
Okay. All right, Lilo, it's time for your judgmental. Time to judge. She was like, you just woke me up.
Oh,
okay, you got my dog. She's
so
judging.
judgy. She is.
She was curled up
Like,
in a blanket on my lap.
oh, so now she's angry and judgy.
Oh yeah, it's extra judgy for you right now.
Yes. Super. Oh, she narrowed her eyes.
You poor little dog.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you up. As you were.
No, you're not.
Well, I think since I'm a quarter of the way through, but yeah, we've pretty much covered all of the discussion points for now. I feel like
we're gonna have
before we venture off into tangents that are nowhere even close to related to the book. Like,
ain't that the truth? We might have to save some of that gossip for off. So.
But this book has been out since November, I want to say. I think I looked that up the other day. So it's been out for a while. So you can definitely order your own copy and read along with us. It will be on our bookshop, which I think I have to update, on bookshop.org. The link is in the show notes. I don't know why I'm pointing down. The only person that's seeing me is Diana. And of course, you know that bookshop.org supports our writers. It supports the podcast, but most importantly, of course, it supports all the wonderful indie bookstores out there. So we appreciate you going through that.
And if you've already purchased the book, there are going to be links. You can find it in our Instagram page and the link tree, and then there also will have a link in our show notes. If you have already purchased the book and you want to support the podcast, you can buy yourself buy us a cup of coffee with Ko-fi, and just for $3 you can help support the podcast and pay some of the bills for our podcast.
Yay, that's a new spiel.
Yay. We're gonna be workshopping that one for a few months, so get used to it, people.
Well, enjoy the rest of your night, everyone, and we'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week.
Bye. Bye.